read an article this afternoon about how Wozniak, one of the original founders of Apple, wasn't it? Yeah. He was saying, drop your Facebook accounts. So listen to Mayor O'Leary and forget what Woz has to say. Anyways, appreciate you being here. I want to talk about one or two items. We had a couple questions from that not so successful effort a couple while ago, so we'll come back and pick those up in a second. I want to talk about something that's ongoing in the county, and while it doesn't affect us in Galion right now, some things may happen over the course of the next few months, including a potential countywide ballot issue. So I wanted to lay out the issue of EMS and how EMS is funded here in Galion, and also talk about what I think is a good model for going forward as they try to improve response time and eliminate the size of the subsidy, or perhaps switch the subsidy from one group of people in the county to another, which is at the end of the conversation is my main concern, because one of the things that's been done real successfully here prior to switching back to a mayor form was the voter support for the police and fire levies. And in the fire part of the levy, that also, it's really police, fire, and EMS. And what I think we have here in Galion and Polk Township as well through a contract is really the model for how we should go forward in providing a reduced response time and reduce the cost to individual citizens who need an ambulance and perhaps don't have insurance and end up being balanced billed by one of the private providers. So here in Galion and in Polk Township, the Galion Fire Department, which has all of our firefighters not only licensed as firefighters, but they're also paramedics. So they're able to respond in an ambulance, but also provide the kind of medical care that paramedics have. And so what we do is respond to any police, fire, EMS, let me back up a little, any fire or EMS call in Galion and Polk Township. Now, of course, the police maintain their principal response area to the city. Sheriff covers the township when it comes to police protection. But fire and EMS is delivered by City of Galion employees, and it's compensated through a contract that runs through 2021 and sets a fixed fee annually, just slightly less than $200,000 a year for the base service of EMS and fire, and then also allows the city, which we do, to bill insurance companies for people who have insurance that are the person making the request for service, and bill Medicare for those amounts. One thing we don't do here that you see is going on in the rest of the county, and I want to focus on Galion's situation for another minute or two, and then just sort of introducing the topic and pointing out, beware of what may end up on the ballot. But we don't charge you. Whatever Medicare pays, and it's particularly important in a community that has a lot of Medicare, meaning older persons that provide a lot of the health coverage. We don't balance bill, easy for me to say, that individual. So whatever Medicare pays, the city takes that, and we don't send grandma or aunt so-and-so or uncle so-and-so a bill, which is difficult to understand, and really puts some seniors at an economic disadvantage. And I think that same model applies countywide. We're a disproportionately older community, so as countywide planners and EMS township officials, city officials grapple with this, I think Galion has a pretty decent model that ability to build those insurance companies for those runs garners the city this year it'll garner the city right around $360,000. So it is with that money that we're able to pay a second crew, roughly speaking, that enables us to have the coverage to not only cover people here in Galion, but to branch out into Polk Township. And while there's a lot of discussion countywide about satisfaction or dissatisfaction with EMS service, to me it's interestingly quiet over here, which I think I've concluded that means that the citizens are being served. The township is happy with the quality and availability and cost of service, and so therefore I think our model here in Galion of a provision of service out into the township area, radiating out of the cities, it might be a model that's preferred over forming a joint EMS district and turning around and levying a property tax on all people in the county. So that issue's out there. I think make one more comment and then we'll get to some other questions. And I encourage people to, if this is the first time that you'd heard about this dynamic between county, township, and city levels of government and how EMS services most efficiently provided, you'll probably hear more and tune your radar, your antenna rather, to the topic, and I think you'll find some interesting things. And in many respects, what we do here in the Galion area could be radiated out. I asked one of our mayor's office staff last week to just make an estimate of how many Jefferson Township, that means north of Brant Road, for you not familiar with the township map, how many of those residences have Galion addresses, so that you can infer relatively close to Galion. There's close to 400 residences in Jefferson Township alone who are now served for EMS purposes by the ambulance service that is stationed out of Bucyrus, which, and then it's 2 minutes away from our fire station here in the city hall where we're talking. So I think for people in Jefferson Township to be aware of how the response times could be improved, and the city of Galion's willingness to, without having to, in Jefferson Township they have a fire department, so we wouldn't be talking about providing fire service except in a backup mutual aid capacity like we've done for many years. But in the EMS world, where we have full-time paramedics, seems like there may be some efficiencies. And I think the key thing for anyone watching this live or watching it in a sort of a streaming form, the key thing is reducing response time for Galion area residents. And so, the Valley View Golf Course, for instance, this meant as a commercial. It's not like it's heart attack central, but if somebody has a major medical incident out there at the golf course, I think it's in everyone's interest. I think we'd have almost unanimous agreement that getting an ambulance there as quickly as possible is the objective, and we should stay from moving into a situation where we're trying to provide response times and subsidies where the system in the Galion area is working. So I'll stop at that point. There is another point of view, and as this issue develops, I suspect we're going to hear from that other point of view. It's really the point in bringing it up is to see if we can provoke a little conversation. Chief Jackson, who also is a township trustee, has been attending Galion on behalf of Galion as they look at countywide EMS and how to provide that and whether it's doable. So I have my absolute confidence in Phil's understanding of the issue, and being someone who can represent not only Galion's interest but perhaps move to a little more efficient EMS service countywide, with Galion playing a greater part than they do now. So.
Okay, we had a couple questions left over from the previous shoot. First one came from Dawn. She asked for an update on getting a grocery store.
Well, not to be a real wise guy, but I bought 2 gallons of milk for 99 cents at Save-A-Lot today. I would comment on, so there was a grocery store, it just took me a while to find it. Joking around, because it's out there, and I had a little trouble finding it because I got stuck in a pothole for a day or so and had to be pulled out, but that is not, that is private property, and I think as time goes on, I'm sure the owners of that property will put some money in the parking lot. So anyways, we do have a grocery store. Tomorrow night at City Council, there's a request to have the state liquor store permit. Any comment from the city about that? And the applicant is the same name of the applicant that asked for the beer and wine permit a couple of meetings ago, the Galion Fresh Market. So I think that's the biggest indication, or the only indication, honestly, that there's something going on or continuing to go on in the Geyer store. And then at the very end of a more serious, and not being a wise guy to Dawn, she's I hope has a good sense of humor today. But like I said, at Save a Lot, milk was 99 cents. So anyway, I do think a Port Authority is going to look at if, for example, the deal in the Galion West Shopping Center doesn't pan out. One of the things I expect the Port to look at through the balance of this year and into next year is the notion of a commercial building which could house a more modern, if you will, state-of-the-art grocery facility. So that's that one.
Okay, thanks, Mayor. Next question from last time came from Lori. She asked, has the city considered reaching out to the Y for discount pool passes when the weather stinks?
No, we haven't considered it. I'm really, before we came on air, Matt read that question. That's the first time I consider it. I don't know quite how we do that. I think a refund is probably not practical, but perhaps if there are a certain number of rain days, I'm just trying to react. I haven't given this any thought at all. But if there's a way, there are a certain number of days in year one that we can't be open because of weather, then perhaps you could credit that off of the next year's pool pass. But I really don't. I'd have to think about it a little bit more. So I guess part of the purpose of doing this are questions like that we can spend a little bit of time thinking about it and then see if council has any interest in that. What I would do, Lori, is that the name? What I do, Lori, is take a look at the council schedule and consider coming to either a parks meeting to discuss that, or ultimately the ordinance that the fees are in would be in a Laws and Ordinances Committee. But if you feel strongly about that, I would come to a committee meeting. I think they're on Wednesdays, but I've lost a little bit track. Usually at 7 o'clock, or by calling up here at City Hall, we can get you the names of the committee members. Shirley Clark is the chairperson of the Parks Committee, and that might be a place to start if you wanted to change the ordinance. But we've not signaled to the Y to go ahead and offer refunds at this point. But it's worth, I guess, pursuing, and I appreciate the question.
Okay, thanks, Mayor. First question from tonight's list comes from Dawn, a different Dawn. She asked, what is going on with the former high school property? I know it's sold, but what's going in?
We don't know much about it. Everyone can do this. I made a comment about checking a couple months ago about looking up some items, like I was that trolling, or that's not the right word, when you're like stalking. So we're not stalking this guy, but he owns a lot of property. He's from the southwest quadrant of the county, a lot of farm ground. So the answer to the question is we're not sure. It is zone multifamily. The word on the street is that it's been bought for single family development, but that rumor is as good as the next one you might see. So what we do know is the name of the individual, and that he has a lot of agricultural ground between Bucyrus and Marion over in that part of the county. Isn't that it, Matt? Isn't that? Yeah, you did the research. You should answer the question. Go ahead, please. Anything else?
Correct. Yes, next question tonight comes from Kim. She asked, can anything be done about the abandoned houses around town?
Yeah, things are being done. We've got $30,000. Let me back up a little bit. There's a list of 25 homes which have been condemned in the city. They're not ranked in kind of worst to first. The only way they're listed, if you will, or the best way that I've seen them listed is by date of condemnation. So that could have been back in 2015. It was the worst, or there were steps taken to get it condemned. It might in 19. It might not even be the worst house if we had the kind of sort of pick the worst, most in need of demolished residents. So we had about $30,000. We got quotes. That'll get us about 3 more. At the same time, we're preparing as a city to apply to the county commissioners. There's some block grant funds that are I believe looking to be reallocated, and so we're going to make a request for a few more. But at this point, with the land bank out of money, we really have 2 alternatives: going to this federal set of funds, community development block grant funds, and knocking off 2, 3, 4 because of the cost of doing this, or the other option, which is something that hasn't been talked about much, but at some point, if it becomes neighborhood problem number 1, and I think in some neighborhoods it is the biggest problem, is that the city takes some of their dollars and puts it into eliminating this blight. Without getting too long in the answer, in the 35 or 40 years I've been in public service, I've seen an increasing attitude that if there isn't a grant to do it, if there isn't state or federal funds to do it, then it just doesn't get done. And I think that applies to this issue of eliminating condemned properties. That if it's a goal to get them done, we as a community are going to have to figure out a way to take some of our tax revenue and put that priority into action and demolish some of those properties. One more thing before we get off of this. What I've seen, quite honestly, now that the government, there's about $1 million worth of property demolished in the last year and a half through it's 800 and some thousand, but close enough to $1 million to call it that. And then the block grant funds that I made reference to, plus private, people do tear down property with their own money instead of government money. The result of that has been what I've seen is a real increase in the cost of having these homes demolished. So, it's natural when there's a lot of work. There's a few contractors, but I've been what you used to be able to get for $3,000 or $4,000 seems like it's become $8,000 or $9,000, and I'm not sure. Although maybe disposal fees have increased. Just seems like with a lot of that government money floating around demolishing properties, the private sector entrepreneurs are kind of going after that sweet federal funds, and then sometimes you hear about them complaining about all the red tape and paperwork. So the question is, are we going to continue to demolish properties? Yeah, at a rate that is probably we'll get 5 or 6 of the 25 that we have currently condemned. So that starts to chip away, but I wouldn't say it does much more than chip away. And so I'd be open to a discussion with council or council candidates, whatever sorts out, about the need to put some more local resources in demolishing properties, because we've attacked residential, but we've really not even made a serious effort at tearing down some of the worst of the commercial structures, which from a safety point of view and an aesthetic point of view probably have a bigger impact throughout the street. That'll upset some people, I think, but I think it's how we have to look at it. We're not going to get them torn down by just waiting on the feds and the state to give us some more honey. We're going to have to go out and make a commitment ourselves.
Okay, thanks, Mayor. Next question tonight comes from Rita. She asked about how she can go about cleaning up an alley behind her house. Specifically, there are mattresses and box springs leaning up against fences.
First thing that sometimes people hesitate to do, but I think it's my best advice on this, is get a surveyor out. And why that's important is because where the alley's at might not be where the alley's at in terms of the property you own. We've seen that all over the place. And, if it's something as simple as you give us your address online or offline rather, and or call us in here tomorrow and we'll send somebody out to pick up a little bit, but I don't want to open up the floodgates on that. But I think in terms of a permanently trying to clean up the alley and keep it free for traffic and such, my best suggestion is get a survey. Some of the most heated battles, which on a rare occasion flare up into a fire department call because of, let's say, something like open burning, or a police call because of some back and forth, start with these kinds of property disputes. And what happens after it's flared up and they've called the building inspector, they've called our office a few times, they've raised heck with all sides involved, they find out the survey was never done, so people are arguing about what they think is their property. It turns out not to be the case, and that we have the problem all over town. I'd say, not problem, but the situations are all over town. So my advice to the person who asked the question is get a survey. Costs you a few $100 perhaps, or some other way to make sure that you know what you're going to remove is on your property and is not somebody else's personal property. But the shortest thing, tomorrow or the next day, call in here and we'll try to send somebody out and see if it can't. I actually like it when that junk is piled in the alley and not sitting on the curb of the street, or there's 2,000 or 3,000 cars a day, but that's trying to make light of a tough situation. But it's all over the town, and a lot of where the alleys are not where the alleys are in terms of your property map.
Okay, thanks, Mayor. Next question tonight comes from Bill. Over on Dawson Avenue, there is a stormwater drainage problem, especially in the 900 block.
Yeah, I'm not sure it doesn't lend itself to a good rendering, but here I'm going to put it up here. I mean, it's not going to look good on the stream or whatever. But there is a plan, and what we've been talking about on this, it's just not going to work real well, you guys. But is this area, and I'm not sure exactly where the 900 block of Dawson is, but this is Dawson down here, and the water needs to flow this way. So what we've been doing is building from wood, riblet, which I think has lower numbered addresses on Dawson, and coming back this way. And the next thing, real quick, is elevation and a watershed map. And so what you've got are low spots here. That's where we've been working, and a high spot by about 10 or 12 feet in the First and Second Avenue. And then people who know the town know that, and then it drops off 8 to 10 feet in and around East Park. And so there's getting the water moving north away from Dawson is part of the issue. So if 900, and maybe I should know, but I don't, if that is in the First, Second, and Third Avenue area, we were talking about designing and funding a project that would start in 2021. We have to have something for where that specific area on Dawson is to connect into. In the short run, there's maybe a a plan to run a tile along the south. There's been some discussion about a low-cost fix that won't really address the overall drainage in that neighborhood, but a lower-cost fix where we'd, with the cooperation of the property owners, would allow them to put tile under Dawson to the south side of Dawson and run it west back towards the substation where there'd be an outlet. But the ultimate plan, the complete plan, is a pretty thorough reconstruction of several of the streets that we've been talking about, and the installation for the first time of really any kind of stormwater facilities. So it's kind of, I guess the spring, if it's done anything for that part of the community, it's really put the spotlight on the need to address this, and there has been a long-term plan developed before I became mayor to tackle this over a 10-year period. And what I'm finding is, I'm like a lot of other things, I'm probably not patient enough to wait 10 years. So we've been asked the city engineer to look at ways to combine projects and accelerate the pace at which we do that. At the same time, we're going to look at lowering, it'll effectively lower all the streets, first, second, third, in that area, Hensley, fifth, and the final product, if you will be a lower street with curb and gutter. And the hope is that a lot of that front yard ponding that you have all throughout those neighborhoods will have an outlet. And the goal, I think, maybe over a 10-year period, once it's built, is that you'll see property values in those neighborhoods go up, because you'll have a street that drains the water, it's new, it's not as pothole ridden. Got a person on First Avenue who has expressed their concern about the surface. She's right. I was on it today. It needs some attention, maybe yet this year. But what we'll do on those streets, this is the last part of that answer, we're probably going to do mostly patching on those streets if in a year or two we come through and reconstruct the entire street. Replacement, if necessary, of water sewer lines, but certainly the installation of stormwater, which really was never done when these subdivisions were built. We were so busy growing and adding jobs and finding places for people to work in that post-Second World War era that a lot of these neighborhoods were built, and those kinds of infrastructure. Heck, I don't even know if infrastructure was that word was maybe made up in the 70s. But anyways, those basic utilities weren't required, and so here we are 60 years probably later. We're going to figure out how to do that. So it's a long answer if you don't live in those neighborhoods, but what I'm trying to say is it's a major problem. We're going to dedicate the resources and try to accelerate the plan. I guess my part in the whole equation is to go out and, back to what I was kind of criticizing before, go hit federal and state funds and bring in as much money so it isn't on the shoulders, this kind of project isn't on the shoulders of just local stormwater and license plate tax, stormwater payers and license plate tax folks. So, all right, if we could do a take two, I'd answer it a little bit different, but it's real important, and the mapping and the commitment to getting it done now and not someday is really what's changed over the past few weeks, and maybe the only good thing of all this damn rain that we've had.
Okay, thanks, Mayor. Next question tonight comes from Joshua. He asks, with the drug epidemic in surrounding cities, what is Galion's current response to the war on drugs?
I don't know how to answer that exactly. I'll start with the city of Galion. We have 3 detectives now. I think 5 years ago we had 1. We have a lieutenant over the detective bureau. When I say the detectives, that's really mostly what they're doing. They're investigating all serious crime, and where I would agree with Joshua on sort of the premise of the question is that that's one of the ongoing serious crimes in the community. I think maybe a little bit different way to answer the question is I think the voters decided a couple months ago now, May, is that when it was? They voted to keep the jail open. And whether, you could have a long discussion, and because the judge, especially Judge Sean Lutholt, is a pretty impressive bodybuilder, I'm not going to pick a fight with Sean tonight. He'd lift me over his head. But anyways, they've been real successful, I think, both Sean and Shane Lutholt, the judges, in addressing this issue. And to a certain extent, the jail is real helpful for taking the most acutely criminal element, the folks that are either craving so bad on drugs or they're just crooks and drug addicts, and locking them up and not hitting them, some lawyers wouldn't like that. There's they aren't just let out in terms of bail and bonding out. So I think we've seen, I think that's a good thing. The other side of it is we're, to some extent, that our jail is being used as a place to dry out folks. I don't know. It's better than having them crawling through somebody's bedroom window. So those are two things. We're staffing it here to try to apprehend people who are supplying dope or using it. And then we're also, I think, supportive generally of at least I am supportive generally of the approach that our county court system has taken. And, the word on the street, I don't know how accurate it is, but they've raised the cost of dealing drugs in the county. And so it doesn't mean that people who are addicted aren't driving to other counties to score, but it does mean that we've chased out some of the most notorious of the drug houses, and a lot of the people that were running those operations are wards of the state right now. So, last couple of things. The connection between where we're not doing enough is with that 13, 14, 15-year-old kid, with activities and things for those kids to do. And so, I'm real proud of what we've done for younger kids with the Splash Park. 2 new toys out there, folks. Stay tuned. They arrived today. And it's great for little kids. I think there were 40 kids out there roughly when I was there about 1 o'clock checking out the package that came. And we're going to have another playground next year for the kind of the pre-teen, but we still don't have, I don't think, the variety of options for things for that pre-driving, that 13 to 15-year-old crowd. And maybe it's changed from back in the 70s, but for the kids who end up in bigger trouble with drugs later on, a lot of that fooling around and that crap starts at that age. And so maybe in some way the construction of a athletic facility that doesn't require membership in the Y and such might provide an outlet for some people who are more physically inclined, but I still don't have it solved. I didn't ask for this answer, but one thing that's pissed me off, quite honestly, is the people from Waycraft Industries had come over as one of their community service projects and had really rebuilt and restained and spent a lot of labor hours. The Kobe Foundation had donated through the help of the chamber, identifying where we could find some resources. We'd fixed up that gazebo. I was told the other day that it's, someone, probably kids, maybe 13 to 15-year-olds with nothing to do, sort of torn the place apart. So it's a little off this question of the drug addiction, but it's that kind of antisocial behavior that is, I think, the best answer, and where we have done not enough is trying to find some things that it can engage other than athletics or perhaps music, because not everybody's into that. Engage those kids so that they're less inclined to get themselves in what can, be a kind of problem that can screw up the rest of your life. So.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. We also had 2 questions, both related to North Market Street. First
Yeah.
one came from Ashley. She asked, is anything being done with the steel plates laid down on North Market?
Yeah, that is a result of a pavement shrinking, or not shrinking, sinking right there that happened, I think 2 weeks ago. And the answer is, yeah, we're looking at whether that's connected with the bridge itself, and then decide how urgently to move on a bridge replacement. I think the biggest concern I got was from the person responsible for bus transportation at the school. I bumped into him at the park the other day, and he was asking about that. And it occurred to me then that there are probably a number of buses that go over that bridge. So the short answer is we're trying to make sure that by replacing not replacing, but repairing the pavement, putting a new surface on north of the bridge itself, whether that will take care of the problem and give us enough time to get a bridge replacement design in place and being able to sell that to the public. So that's where that's at. You know, a couple weeks ago, the biggest issue on North Market is from Hetrick out to the township line, and it's still in miserable shape. And of course, the township paved out there, and you know, we're coordinated on EMS, but we don't have our paving programs well coordinated. So that what you've identified there is an issue that we were looking at, and then we had this. Oh, it's not really a sinkhole, but a failure of the pavement there, and that's where we're at, trying to see if it's bridge associated or just roadway. And if it's roadway, we can move with a little less of a panic or urgency.
Ironically, that was actually the second question related to North Market, is how soon will the section between Hetrick and Schweitzer be leveled out?
Well, you know, it's kind of funny, and as a supporter of the gas tax, as it was going through the legislature, I didn't have a bumper sticker on my car saying, I want to raise your gas tax. But as it sorts out, and before you get too upset about it, the city of Galion will get a little over $200,000 a year in new gas tax money. What I envision is taking those new dollars and almost doubling what we put into the streets. So in our prioritized list of paving, that Market Street is moved close to the top, and my hope is with a little bit more, with 40% more resources for paving locally, that we'll be able to get that project done. God, I'd like to think in 2020. If we don't get it done, I'll have to run again on the mayor who never paved Market Street. So anyways, I think we'll get that done in next year if you look at the resources and what it needs. But it's pretty rough ride from particularly Hetrick. But back to the first question, we're looking at hopefully just repairing the pavement and then moving more deliberately to a bridge replacement instead of more an emergency bridge repair project and connecting pavement repair.
Okay, thanks, Mayor. Next question tonight comes from Samantha. She asks, is Jim Hedges still doing Oktoberfest?
You know, we had a person who I know from, I think Matt went to a couple of meetings. I know a guy who is working with him has come up here and made some requests for a beer permit. That's about all I know. The other thing I would say is that in order to get all that in place, we need to see some action pretty soon. So what I can say for sure, Samantha, is that one of the I think a representative of that group, and I believe they're still linking up as their nonprofit, because in the ordinance, in order to get one of these temporary permits in the uptown area, you have to the permit request has to come from a nonprofit. That nonprofit is going to have to get involved in the paperwork. We've got some insurance requests. I think our stance or the way we look at it here at City Hall is, we'd like to see it started back up again, and we've been supportive up until last year when it just didn't happen. So we know how to provide the services. We know how to charge for the electric and other things. We know what in the past has been discounted, if you will, in terms of the charge that the city has. Specifically, what I'm talking about, we don't charge for anything during the week in terms of the labor that's required to hook up the water and the electric drops and such. And the only expense is any overtime that we have in getting it cleaned back up, or in any overtime that results in any kind of electric emergency during the festival or something like that. So the charges aren't unreasonable. What we want to do is maintain the same cost to the sponsor that we've had in our contracts in the past. So I think that's probably the most complete answer. We hope so, and we'll support it, but there's some time frames that are going to get in the way if they want to do it that last week in September going into October.
Okay, thanks, Mayor. Next question tonight comes from Brian. He asked, is the city able to force people who purchase houses at auction, can we force them to clean it up or do something with the property?
No. I mean, there's, I don't know, without knowing exactly where Brian's coming from, there are funds out there, the CHIP funds, and they're, without getting on a worn out old pony and complaining about the state and how they've set up the housing and the block grant programs. Oh, never mind, I'm going to anyways. Over the past few years, that housing rehab money, which I think is a legitimate use, you buy a house, rehab it, make it habitable, and go. That's a good use of those funds. They've been a little more difficult to access in terms of who to talk to. There's the city has been disconnected from that process, and you have to work through the same company that administers the block grant. So it's, in my view, it's become a little bit difficult from a bureaucratic point of view. But the point I'm trying to get to is that you can, somebody could buy a house at auction or buy it in a distressed sale, and then utilize CHIP funds if they want to be a single family occupant or whatever. So I wouldn't want to rule out people trying to come in and take ownership of some of these structures and bring them back to life. I would say that kind of connected to that Eric Baldinger is spent a lot of hours on that. A lot of those issues, he's the building inspector, a lot of those issues come to him, and he's worked quite a few hours trying to identify and get through the court system the condemnation on some of these houses. But there isn't really anything we can do to stop somebody who buys a house that's not condemned but is at sheriff's sale, buying that and I guess sitting on it, or not or even worse than sitting on it, if it's underwater, just watching it go underwater. But the key right along has been to figure out ways to get investment into those housings, that housing stock, and I think part of that has to do with working more with the local banks and within the limitations they've got. So no is the short answer. The rest of it is mostly elaboration, I think, probably.
Okay, and the last question I have for right now is from Mary. She asks, what is being done to clean up the former credit union building on Harding Way?
It's a private property issue. I was encouraged a few weeks ago, or maybe it's been longer than that now, that there was they painted the roof and did some things, and once again the word on the street was that there were 2 nonprofits perhaps going in there. But yeah, it's kind of a rough spot. There's a couple in a row on Harding Way West that are not maintained nearly as well as the rest of the homes along in there. And it sounds sort of patronizing, but it's a shame I saw Pat Connery, for the Galionites who know Pat. He was there mowing his family's, what I consider their homestead. That family has been there a long time. I saw Pat sweating and mowing. I thought, boy, as an older guy, that's dedication to keep the family property looking good. So, was that hat tip or something? Thumbs up to Pat. We used to call him Zeke when he was in elementary school, but that's the difference between some of the properties and how they're maintained in others. And so I think more or less along Harding Way it's looking pretty good. And I, like everyone else, am a huge fan of the Historical Society and mostly the people whose images are up there. It's pretty cool to see different generations of people. But those veterans flags, those American flags, really look good. And I thank the line department. I think we're pretty much fully stocked. We were down on flags. I think we're up to that. But it makes Harding Way and all the way from one end of town to the other pretty special place. So anyway, that mowing the grass would really help the last couple. But if I say that, I need to go mow grass at my house, huh?
I think that's all the questions we have.
Yeah, we appreciate the participation. I want to finish up where we started. The model for providing ambulance service outside the city in this county, I think, has been well established. The one that works the best, I believe, is the Polk Township Galion model. I'd be anxious, but if we got a call tomorrow from Jefferson Township to discuss the Beardsley subdivision, that Walnut Creek that's right on the north end of Brant Road, or any of the more Galion area properties, and that we would. I know there, in past years, in those dark days of city management, there was some hard feelings established by the way that bargaining was done, and deals that would have made a heck of a lot of sense to work collaboratively didn't happen. I'd like to think we can make something work so that the people that see themselves as Galionites have the benefit of locally dispatched, highly professional police and ambulance service fire and ambulance service that can increase safety and response time and maybe save a life or two. So I'm anxious to get the conversation going. It should be about reducing response time and perhaps lives saved as a result, not about who's going to pay what for some subsidy for a private ambulance company. So Galion knows where we're coming from on this, and Phil Jackson did a hell of a job for us in making that point on a countywide basis. So enough said. Thanks a lot for tuning in, and share this with your friends. We'll see you in a couple weeks.